Etch is a company that's putting payroll on the blockchain and at the same time allowing workers to get paid in real time instead of once every 2 weeks or once every month. I talked to Ben Whyte from the Etch team to find out more. Thanks for coming on today. The first question I have for you is, what are some problems in current payroll systems that need to be fixed?
Yeah, so I mean, the problems in payroll are twofold essentially. On the employer's side, you're dealing with this very inefficient, antiquated system, which is quite an administrative burden. It's sensitive to time-sensitive requirements from HMRC and other governments. It's quite a, there's a high associated time and cost to these payroll activities. And ultimately, it can also be quite a source of contention between the employer and the employees, particularly when this doesn't go, when it's not done correctly. Then on the employee side, obviously, the employees, when they join a company, they're already subsidizing their employer's cash flow for their own by getting paid at the end of the month. Now, when you begin to think that, say, in the UK, 1/3 of workers are living paycheck to paycheck. In the US, it's 50%. In Canada, it's 50% of workers living paycheck to paycheck. And these are supposed to be the developed countries, the wealthy ones. And then when you begin to consider that, say, a lot of these workers, particularly in the lower income brackets, might also be migrant workers supporting families back home. Now, these migrant workers, when they send remittance back to their family, they're not only waiting until the end of the month, they might be waiting an extra week with an additional sizable fee on top of that, which can be really painful for these families. And quite frankly, with today's technology, that doesn't need to be the case, which is why we've developed Etch. It's a blockchain protocol for payroll, and we use smart contracts to stream wages and remittances in real time.
So could you go a little bit more into detail? What exactly you mean by real time? Is it real time, or end of the day real time, or how does that work?
Yeah, so we use smart contracts so that the payments will flow into an employee's bank account, or sorry, into their account. There's no need for a bank. Second by second, minute by minute, all day. And this can all be worked out in the employer's web interface dashboard. You can actually play around with this on the demonstration on our website.
So, and you had mentioned earlier that, one of the advantages of getting paid at the end of the month for the employer is they get to hold on to the money that whole time. So what incentive is there for the employer to go on a system like this?
Yeah, so realistically, now we think that the employers tend to benefit greatly from having this additional month cash flow. But realistically, most businesses have more than 1 month's operating expenses to work with at any given time anyway. Holding on to that cash flow, you're kind of assuming that they're perhaps gaining some sort of interest from it, which in the current environment, we know they aren't really. And it's, as a society, the way that we've come to view money, our relationship to it, has ultimately been defined by the way that financial services have been capable of delivering it. So we've come to understand money as being this thing that has to come in chunks, in monthly chunks. We have our mortgage payments, or our rent, or our monthly bills, our subscription services. Everything works in this kind of context because it was the easiest way and the only way that financial institutions could do this and make it all work and settle everyone's transactions. But now that we have blockchain technology and smart contracts to execute this differently, that's no longer necessary. We can begin streaming wages in real time. We can begin streaming almost any kind of payment in real time. And that's a complete game changer. Particularly when you can begin to consider the effects that streaming services have had on other industries. Whether this is Spotify and Netflix, when you're comparing that to, say, downloading MP3s or renting DVDs, it just opens up a whole new convenience-based, customer-centric business model that works for the employers and works for the employees, and addresses a lot of other issues around that. Actually, I think one other thing on the employer's side. Now, obviously, if you begin to use a payroll system, which is blockchain based, you have a lot more visibility across all the operations going on in your organization. So typically businesses that might need to rely on, say, their employees' cash flow, they're also likely to be the types of businesses that rely on front-end financing services to continue operating way into the future. Now, for the financial institutions who are lending that money, any uncertainty around the business activities is an inherent risk in what they're doing. So by putting more of these activities onto a blockchain, you're improving the visibility across the whole organization, which reduces the risk for the lenders, which is then improving access to lines of credit for the businesses, as well as giving them access to these credit lines at a lower interest rate, which is ultimately going to make them more profitable and more capable of getting out of debt in the longer term.
Yeah, it's a really good point. So where along on the roadmap are you guys? You mentioned you have a demo on your website. Where do you expect to be in, say, 6 months from now?
So I'll begin where we are now and then head on to 6 months' time. So where we are now, we're due to announce our second pilot shortly. We've already done a first one, which was essentially using our web interface to manage the payroll system, and it uses a smart contract to execute and automate the straight-through payroll processing. We did that on a construction site in Oxford. Our second pilot is going to be significantly larger and a longer-term project. We look forward to announcing that shortly. In 6 months' time, we hope to begin working on the phase 2 of our implementation, and that is essentially letting the workers have access to these mobile apps, a mobile interface, so that they can see their wages streaming into their account real time, and they have more options around how they begin to do that. Do they potentially want to split that into a savings account, or be sending it to their, I don't know, their spouse or their children's saving accounts or something like that? So have more ability to turn the taps on as to where their money's going.
I imagine that would be very motivating too at 2 o'clock in the afternoon when you're starting to get tired. You just pull out the app and see how much money you've made that day.
Yeah, well, we certainly hope so. I mean, I think the really great thing about this is because you're getting paid from day one and you're getting paid exactly what you're owed every second of the day. If you were dead broke walking into work Monday morning, you've got money in your bank account to buy, sorry, I keep saying bank account, in your account. There are no banks, don't need banks. You have money in your accounts to buy lunch come midday. You can afford your travel home if things are really that dire. Or, I know one particular issue that we're really excited to help contribute a solution towards is that in overcoming payday loans. Say for example, if your car breaks down in the middle of the month, you have this unaccounted expense, which ordinarily, if you're getting paid at the end of the month, you might not be able to make things stretch in order to accommodate for this unexpected expense. In which case you might have to rely on a payday loan to make it last for the extra 2 weeks and fall into this debt trap and what's potentially a really vicious cycle that it's a story we're all quite familiar with. And yeah, we hope that's another issue that we can solve by paying people in real time.
Well, great, Ben. And one last thing I'd like to ask everybody, kind of their personal story. How did you get into blockchain technology and that kind of stuff?
So I initially got into blockchain when writing my dissertation on Bitcoin in 2013. And I was absolutely amazed by all the implications of what this cryptocurrency could do. Bitcoin as a currency, when I was researching the history of money, our current state of affairs, and looking into the future, I thought this is absolutely fantastic. But little did I know at the time of writing this that the Bitcoin as a currency was really just the tip of the iceberg. When I began exploring all the possibilities of what blockchain could bring us, decentralizing a whole new generation of services in this way, I was, literally feel the excitement swelling up inside me. I thought, this is where I need to be heading. This is where I need to go. But I'm not a software developer, and neither am I an investor with millions of pounds at my fingertips to sort of buy my way into projects like this. So I had to think, how am I going to zigzag my way to this blockchain future? So, I left university. I started a couple of businesses, worked for a few other startups, did an awful lot of networking in the London blockchain scene, kind of zigged and zagged my way here. It was around nearly 3 years ago now that I first met Eros Evans, our CEO, at a meetup that he runs in London called No Man, which if anyone listening to this is from London, you should come along, find us on meetup.com. It's really a fantastic melting pot of ideas, lots of great characters who just come and drink beers, play pool, and talk about blockchain. It's wonderful. And it's also where I began to meet the rest of the Etch team and the supporting cast who would ultimately be our advisors and early contributors to the project. And that was my introduction to blockchain, essentially. I'm excited to have made it here.
All right, great. Well, thanks so much for your time, Ben. If I'm ever in London, I'm definitely going to come check out that meetup.
Yeah.
All right.
Yeah, please do. Great. Thank you.
All right, thank you.